Okay, so it's very exciting for me to once again be talking with Michael, aka Spider Webb, who's a delirious thinker, or architecture became delirious after Webb. You know, like I just can't. I mean, have you ever done a project, Michael? Maybe this is my first question. Have you ever done a project where you started the project and then finished it, or is it they just never die? They just keep
No,
going and
I
going.
make sure it doesn't die,
Right.
and I stop before I finish because I can imagine its perfection when complete, but never
So
have to be disillusioned by the actuality of the perfection,
there you go.
which is
So
very imperfect.
right. So you are thought of by me and many as one of the great kind of hands of architecture and also great brains of architecture. And you make these extraordinary drawings, which for us are perfect, but for you are never perfect. And so you never actually make a drawing. You just keep drawing all the time,
Yes,
right?
that's right. I think that's the one situation in which I resemble Leonardo, who never finished anything, as far as I remember reading, and that by doing so, he was unable to see its imperfections.
Right. So it might seem odd for me being obsessed with television and Waxman and TV to want to talk to one of the great hands and brains, but I'm really interested in which way television and Waxman have crossed your path, Michael. I know, of course, and I'm a little bit obsessed with the role of TV in Cushicle, and I want to talk about that. But just in more general terms, is Waxman a figure for you, or was a figure for you?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it was to do with, I think, the publication in 1962 of The Turning Point of Building. And I realized then what a superb mind he had, a creative mind.
Right.
And I got very interested by one of the projects towards the end of the book. I remember, I've lost my copy of it, but I remember a village hall prototype project made out of movable panels, floor and wall and ceiling.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that one,
I
but it
do.
was,
It's a project he did with students in Salzburg, I think. It's
oh,
astounding.
really?
Yeah, it's an astounding project. I send you some pictures because I I can see why you would be hooked, because it's a building that's nothing and then everything, depending on
Yes.
the time of the day, right?
But when I saw that book first in 62, I was quite a young man and fell heavily under the influence of Waxman. And so what I call the 25 by 25 house derived from the panel building he showed in The Turning Point of Building.
Right, right.
And it's called 25 by 25 because of Mies's 50 by 50 house.
Yeah.
Which
And
actually was a speculative project, I remember reading.
and in the 20, if I remember rightly, in the 25 by 25 house, which is sort of not a house, right? Or it's the possibility of a house, like a system that could produce a house or could produce
Yes,
something else. Is that right?
yes, well, it's really a series of panels rolling along a trackway, which at one point open out. And in fact, I was just using the lovely invitation card to the exhibition I had at Columbia as a device for adding to the drawing I was doing of the 25 by 25 house. But the idea, may I describe the,
Yeah,
is
please.
that appropriate now?
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
It was made of panels, 4 of which would form a floor and another 4 a ceiling. And in between would be rollable, openable panels, rather like doors with hinges, which could move across the floor and develop and integrate spaces that the occupants could enjoy. For example, the husband or the wife might decide to go and hide themselves in a room, and they would take the elements with them that they would need during the time they were in that room, so that you would have a bedroom created out of components which would be short term and
Right.
which would last the night, and then something, the same panels would be rearranged to form a different sort of space.
So my impression, Michael, is that in this project, which is a kind of dance of the panels, right?
Yes.
The panels move in four-dimensional space, and depending on their movements, something like architecture is produced. It appears, disappears, appears, disappears. It feels to me that this is more Waxman than Waxman, because you even put the factory for producing the panels is also part of the
Oh yes, well,
place.
it was all on site and manufactured as needed,
Right?
coming off the belt.
Right. So to me, it's a little bit more radical than you're the victim of Waxman, but then he becomes your victim
Yes,
because in your case, instead of making the panels in a factory and putting them on a truck and taking them to the side, there's a sort of mini factory, tiny little magical panel making machine,
absolutely.
and a tiny truck, like a little vehicle that moves around and becomes a kind of companion. Like in a way, there are people and this little vehicle and the panels, and that's it.
Yes. And then when they were finished with, they would be disposed of. So you would have another machine which chewed them up and recycled them for different use, of course. I had
So
great fun doing this. I think the difference between the Wachsmann version and my own is that mine could be all at funny angles to each other, so you can have non-rectangular
right,
rooms.
right. So once again, I think you out Waxman. Even, for example, the idea that the panels could be dissolved and recombined and recycled,
Yes,
whereas Waxman, the panels are almost sort of ideal objects that float always in a kind of orthogonal rigor.
yes, that's right.
They can come and go, but they will always be right angles.
With delicious joints that could be tapped in place, but no more than that. You would crack open the joint, apparently, with Wachsmann's hanger.
And
But anyway,
but by the way, how do you make a joint delicious? Like I know how you make a delicious
delicious to look at.
meal, delicious to look at, but for you, what makes a drawing delicious? Like, are there certain quality that you get attracted to, or?
When something works out nicely and when it starts to look good and one gets surprised because one had expected the usual disappointments and suddenly it works for one.
Right. So what I love in what you're saying is that what's delicious is surprising, but also surprising in that it works. And it's something that strikes me of all your projects. They all work. Like there are a kind of working out. I mean, there's always an unbelievable rigor.
Yeah.
But at first it looks like Michael Webb is making these sort of fantasy worlds that are, but actually, if you zoom in on those worlds, they are all calculated. Like there's a lot of calculation. There's a lot of, let's say, working. It strikes me that this is very different from other, what you call speculative architecture. I mean, your things always work, but you never build them. So they're sort of all in a funny relationship to actually happening. They almost have already happened in your drawings.
Yes, well, it implies that there's a vast number of drawings which didn't work, because for everyone that works, there's a whole portfolio of disasters and wrong turns and so on.
Yeah.
But can I just say, while it's in my head,
Yeah.
that one thing about the 25 by 25 house was the fact that it's a building whose life is in the movement of the various components.
Right.
It's lovely when they're moving. And that was something that inspired us all in the early archigram group, that the building seemed interesting and fascinating while it was being built, But by
Right.
the same token, while it was being demolished as well, it
Right.
was only during its static life that we lost interest in it.
Right.
And
And
so,
it seems to me that's captured beautifully in the way you draw the 25 by 25, because firstly, it's like you're still working on that project. So it starts in which year is it, more or less? 66?
63.
63. So it started
Yes.
in 63 and it's still going in the year 2020. But along the way, at some point, you started to draw it from the point of view of the panels. Like we see, as one of the panels comes along on the trolley and twists in order to become a wall or whatever it becomes, a floor,
Yeah.
you follow what the panel sees. So it's a kind of panelized view. It's like the panel is the star, and the humans are almost incidental, and architecture is, let's say, almost incidental. It's about this choreography. I mean, it's a kind of dance. It seems like you are choreographing a kind of flow of panels. It's quite extraordinary, no? That
Yes.
you sort of side with the panel. It's like you think panels are more interesting than than people, which may be true, right?
Well, yes, in the invitation card you did for me for the Columbia show,
Yeah,
it shows the panel, and the panel moves through space, rotating, tilting, unbalancing itself, whatever. But the person remains in a fixed position relative to it.
right,
So the
right,
panel always looks the same, but all the other panels are doing crazy gyrations,
right,
including the little man too, who's looking at the one panel, of
right.
course.
So you sort of destabilize three times. I mean, architecture is only movement, and then in this movement, the human is spinning around as well, is being spun by the
Yeah.
panels. So for me, it's a, of course, extraordinary project, because in the center of it, the panel system does allow for the construction of interior spaces, bedrooms, escapes. I mean, you show it working. Once again, it works. And it makes me seem very boring indeed. Do you have any thoughts about Mies, by the way?
Well, I just finished reading the Broken Glass, it's called, the
Yeah.
book about the building of the Farnsworth House. And never say anything bad about Mies in my presence, Mark. Uh, Mies was
Because
great.
he was great.
He
Yeah.
was great. But
Are you able to say what about Mies is Mies delicious?
delicio, which is the Latin,
Yes.
which can mean many different things. So
Yes.
delicious can mean delicious visually, and
Yeah.
that's the way I would mean it.
Right.
Um,
But when people normally think about so-called radicals, and you are one of the most famous of the so-called radical architects, they think kind of that you would be against Mies, that you would be what comes after or what undoes Mies. But you're saying no, don't say anything bad about Mies.
well, his achievement in life was incredible, wasn't it? But,
Yeah, yeah, but you can say bad things about people that were very successful.
oh yes.
In fact,
But
it might make more sense to say bad things about those people than anyone else.
had he lived a bit longer, he would have been present and around when Foster started doing buildings, and Rogers, like the building at Columbia,
Right.
with the beautiful prongs that hold the glass, and that's it, nothing else. That's where Mies would have gone next had
So
he
you
lived
felt, yeah,
longer.
you feel
You
Mies,
know,
another Mies. I
I mean,
mean,
he was still stuck with window frames, wasn't he? Which was a
yeah.
great shame. And cheap. I always thought the columns at the Barcelona Pavilion looked cheap
Oh dear.
with that crucifix form. And what was
I think
it?
that's the ultimate criticism for Mies, because he was very expensive.
Very expensive.
There
That
was this,
marble.
there's something aristocratic about Mies. But the reason, the reason I push a little bit on the Mies thing is that Waxman and Mies were very close. In the project behind you, the aircraft hangar, a
Yes.
structural system. Mies and Mies's students worked with Waxman to make the convention center project using that very same system. So Mies and Waxman were kind of became drinking friends in Chicago in 1949, 50, 51.
Mhm.
And they learned a lot from each other. And so there is something very much of Mies in Waxman, and I would say something of Waxman in Mies. So when you do the 25 by 25 house, having been kind of influenced or inspired by the Turning Point, the panel project, there is a relationship with Mies. Like something is happening to Mies in your 25 by 25, not just the name of it, like versus 50 by 50, but also the idea that you could make architecture out of very, very thin screens, that architecture would become, in Mies's language, almost nothing.
Beinahe nichts.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I tried to make the 25 by 25 house that when it disassembles itself, I should say, I'm the one who disassembles. When it disassembles itself, then there literally is nothing there.
Right.
Except the frame that brought the panels along.
Right. So you know, at the middle of Michael Webb's world of architecture, there is nothing. I mean, in the positive sense, that there you're very faithful, it seems to me, to the Miesian thing of doing that you know, less is more. That it's how to make a house that could be not a house or anything you want with the minimal possible tricks and tools and systems. And the 25 by 25 is in that sense super Miesian, like thoroughly Miesian in its aspirations, even if visually it looks the opposite. Looks like a kind of terrorist attack on Mies turning into Mies in a tornado.
Yes, but several people have tried to get me to do an elevation of the building, which I've yet to do, which looks satisfactory. But there's nothing in the house, but on top of the roof and below the floor, has to be a huge amount of equipment and motors and gadgets and so on to make it all operate. So in fact,
secrets.
You know, it depends how you look at the house, whether you see it as empty or full.
Okay. So you win, Michael. So almost nothing actually requires hiding a lot.
Indeed, it's a matter of concealing.
Exactly. Now, can we try to? Of course, I'm very, very fascinated in Cushicle, and for me remains Cushicle one of the great ongoing polemical works. And here we see the TV set is right at the middle of the middle of the middle. I mean, if I understand it, I mean, it's better for you to explain to me what Cushicle is, but what I see is a kind of cocoon, a kind of inflated, soft enclosure, a kind of first architecture for a body, which can attach itself to a kind of spine, which has certain technological advantages in terms of movement and position, which can also inflate into a kind of a space. So you get these skins within skins within skins, but hovering right between the first two skins, but you know, a piece of the spine that wraps itself over and around your head and comes right in front of your face is a TV set. So without that TV set, no Cushicle, I would say. Am I right?
Nothing to watch.
Well, also, why would you be there? I mean,
indeed.
I suppose my question is more like why you put the TV there and why was it necessary, or why was it part of this minimal?
To confess, I never really thought about that. And the TV was merely to give the occupant, a bald-headed lady, something to look at, some TV to watch.
Right. But you say you didn't think about it, but I noticed that, I noticed that, of course, I I think you never do anything without thinking. And I noticed that also the inside of the bubble, when it blows up, becomes another kind of TV. And you even say that in one of your texts that
Oh, I do?
you do.
Ah.
Obviously not
Notice.
thinking at the time, but so you have a little TV right in front of you. It's almost part of your body,
Yeah.
or you're part of it. And then when the architecture becomes bigger, so too does the image, and you are sort of inside a kind of spherical TV. So it could be what you say, that it just gives you something to do, and yet it seems like the main event.
Especially as television sets in that age had very strongly rounded corners,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is completely gone now.
right. So your
But that
TV is a TV.
implies some sort of uh, rounded 4D vision, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Which fits very nicely with the whole assemblage of the Cushicle. But
yeah,
what I was really interested in that, since inflatables were de rigueur at that period, everyone was doing inflatables, I got very interested in the notion of skins, the skin of the undershirt we were wearing, a sweater, an overcoat. And I imagined a person sitting inside their car in the garage, and you would have a series of concentric skins.
hmm,
And why we see them as not being connected together is that different materials, the car is pressed metal, the garage is wood and tile and so on, the shirt is fabric. But I thought that if the character sitting inside the car was off to a fancy dress ball, as we would call it in England, I mean costume party, of course. If he was
yeah,
off to a costume party and wearing a suit of armor, he would have a metal skin inside a pressed metal skin. And if we substituted the tiled suburban garage for, say, the press room at Lord's Cricket Ground in London by Future Systems, which is a stainless steel bubble,
yes,
one would see the connection between the skins. Because at the moment, our clothing skin is called fashion, and our house skin is called architecture, but they're really similar in some ways,
yeah,
such as I just enumerated.
yes. What you say reminds me of Gottfried Semper in the middle of the 19th century said that architecture is clothing. And
Oh, he did?
yes,
Ah.
and so he would be nodding his head while you were talking. That and he said also it was sensuous, that clothing was not so much geometrical, but the garment forms a space just through its pattern and its texture, even its kind of material technology. So and when we're in a house, we're sharing a garment together, and just as you say, like layers like this. What interests me here is, and he said, for example, that Greek temples are covered with paint because that's the paint, the surface, the skin is really where the architecture is, not the structure behind the skin. Structure, he said, is just an element for holding a scaffolding, for
Yeah,
holding up the
holding
skin.
it up.
So again, we're back into this thing as we were with the 25 by 25, the idea of architecture made by a kind of mobile screen or surface or skin. And in the case of Cushicle, there's, as you say, layers of them. And somehow television is, and some of the hard and some are soft, right? And you said it in your example, if the house is soft, then maybe the suit you wear is hard, or vice versa. Somehow television is somehow inserted into this system of skins, that one of the skins becomes a TV and the other one is part of the body and so on. But you were not so obsessed with TV, and yet there it is.
Yes, I wonder about it. Now you mention it, TV is like an eye in a sense.
Mm.
And I wonder, I was thinking about, apparently the anti-evolutionists confirm their bizarre view by saying, how was an eye formed? How did an eye develop
Right.
in using the evolutionary method? But maybe the eye has developed out of the cushicle itself and has adapted over the years and becomes part of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. You say this is something never occurred to me
Yeah.
before you mentioned it.
Yeah.
And
So you say, Michael, but over the years, and I think we've known each other for some time, some decades, it's always like this when we talk, because actually you have thought about it and you thought it through, and you're saying extraordinary things, that everything, that the eye would be at the center and that the TV is an eye. I think, for example, when you draw the Cushicle, the very first version, the TV set even has the shape of an eye. It hangs over in front like this, and it's kind of quite round, kind of biomorphic. Then I think in the next version of the project, it becomes a little bit more traditional TV, and you have little antenna sticking out.
yeah,
But you raise this question of who's watching who. In the 25 by 25 house, I think the panels are doing the watching. The panels are the real inhabitants of the space, and the protagonist, and they are the actors. Maybe in Cushicle, the TV is also much more active, looking and being looked at, a kind of double move, much like you and I are doing now, right? We are talking, looking, talking. I don't know whether we are looking or being watched in this moment.
yes. Well, I don't know. I think the Cushicle redefines certain of the elements that form a house, conventional elements that form a house. For example, the outer skin of the Suitaloon,
Yes.
a word coined by Sir Peter,
Yes.
Was really became a wardrobe, as we would say in England, a
Yes.
clothing closet. Because when you walked into it, you left your clothing skin on the outside of the bubble.
Right. Right. So I think what you're saying reminds me of Raina Banham, who was such a key voice and friend to you guys at that time. And when he says essentially a house now could be a kind of bunch of technologies of communication and plumbing with a little bit of a bubble, and that's all you need. And in this project, I think he's very influenced by what you guys are doing rather than the other way around. But somehow traditional architecture becomes almost nothing, and there's this little sort of plumbing technology that makes it possible. Somehow the Cushicle is almost the extreme version of that argument, because it doesn't even necessarily have the bubble, or you could make a bubble. The bubble can appear as Suitaloon, but you don't necessarily need it. So it's almost like, I see the Cushicle kind of almost like a philosophical project. What if we could really try to reduce architecture to nothing? That means almost nothing. It has to be something. We need shelter, we need fun, we need connection, we need relationships. There's all sorts of things we need. But what would be the minimum set of equipment that could accomplish all of this? And I think Cushicle is sort of like, you threw it out there almost like, well, I think I could do almost everything with just this. And once again, I think that appeals to that minimalist side of Waxman and Mies. Like, what's the maximum that could be done with the minimum? It doesn't mean with nothing, but it is very little. Like this, the Cushicle has this kind of metal, I guess it's metal spine with the wheels and so on. It's almost looks like a human, or it looks like an animal already of some kind. Did you think it that way when you drew it? The TV now becomes the head actually of this animal.
Through drawing it, I realized the connection. And in fact, one of the drawings showing the Cushicle standing up, it does look rather like a round-shouldered individual.
Yes, yes.
Leaning forward.
Yes, which might mean that when you're in the Cushicle, you're never alone. You're always at least with that. You're always in the arms of this, because also you're kind of in the arms or the lap of this creature. No, you're a little bit exposed to this. I mean, what if the electricity would run the wrong way? You could be.
I hate to think.
You could be sliced up. So you're kind of, again, one of the great joys of this project, you are suspended in this kind of inflatable world, like in a sleeping bag that's nurturing you. And yet you are a little bit vulnerable because of this metal instrument that you're in. Is it my memory that you were originally inspired by this kind of liquid heated suit that would enable the human to survive in
Manufactured by the Frankenstein company.
There we go. Back to the. That was the inspiration.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that came out about 61, I think, that suit. Yeah.
So already the skin, already the suit of clothing, already the suit that's technological, like or you see all the tubes. And again, a kind of minimum. What would enable? Is this also about astronauts and all of that?
Yes, I'd say yes. And I'd also like to add that David Green's log plug project is almost, you would need that installed to allow Cushicles to be running around all over the place. The nodal point where the gas station where you refill, where you recharge.
Oh, that's so interesting you say that, because I noticed that at the beginning, the first time that you published Cushicle, Suitaloon, it was usually in association with Rockplug. And now you never, I don't think you guys ever said it, but now you say it, that actually if we try to do the minimum, try to make architecture do everything but with almost nothing, you need more than the Cushicle. You need also Rockplug. You need also this infrastructure of these more or less hidden but pervasive systems of information, food, water, etc.
Yes, I mean, I was talking to David about his project recently and thinking that there was one drawing he should have done which is missing, which is a vital drawing, which would be to take a landscape by Claude Lorraine and people it with these devices and perhaps a Cushicle there as well. And that, because for David, the sentimentality and the nostalgia of the elimination of buildings and to restore the world to its pristine original beauty, that was the theme with Rockplug. Right. And somehow you must have accommodation for all the souls who wish to disport themselves in this idyllic landscape where it's never cold, where it's always about 6 p.m. on a hot summer evening.
No, I was just going to say that I was thinking, just inspired by what you were saying, if you have this Frankenstein spacesuit thing as your inspiration, I remember David Green has that beautiful picture of a man fishing in the middle of nature with a little portable TV set.
That's right. So
with David, you have this kind of claim that if we can make architecture with almost nothing, at least there will be the TV. And that almost creates around him a sort of domestication of the pastoral landscape. And likewise in your project, there is a TV. So I would argue, of course, this is because I'm obsessed with TV, and I push it on you guys, but I see there in these absolutely crucial polemical projects in which both of you are really faithful to the modern architect's ambition to sort of technically try to get more with less, and almost to make architecture come alive, become more mobile, more ephemeral. Somehow the TV set is in there as either a necessary element or as an anesthetic, or or like the cockpit in an airplane, or as you say, as the eye. And I'm curious the role of television, and I think if I take television out of Michael Webb disappears, actually. Even if you would say no, I wasn't even thinking about it, I think it's somehow lurking there. And my romantic way of saying it would be, if I look at 25 by 25 house, it requires you to enjoy this house requires you to give up on the old idea of stability, certainty, and so on in architecture, and to embrace a kind of cloud of potentials that everything could change and is only interesting, only delicious, as you say, if it changes. And that means you kind of head into a world of images. So it's kind of televisual. It's kind of, and in that sense, super Michael Webb, because every element and every geometric position and every joint and everything is calculated, but calculated to unleash the unknown in a delightful way. And so you set these things dancing, and I think that's why you never stop drawing them, because if you stop drawing them, they stop dancing. So they just keep, this house really happened, 25 by 25 house. I think it's not your favorite set of drawings, right?
Oh, they're awful drawings.
They're awful. So the awful
just
ones,
doing, funnily enough, I'm just doing another version now.
yeah, I can totally believe it. I'm sure by the end of this conversation, the project has been dancing all along while you've been drawing while putting up with me. And I should put you out of your misery soon. But I think it's in this spirit. I think that one way to think about the relationship of figures like Waxman, you know, you see a project of, did you ever meet him, by the way?
Never.
Never.
No.
Would you be interested, or it didn't really matter?
Oh, I would love to have met him.
Yeah, me too.
He was
Yeah,
a
me too.
god.
Oh, yeah?
Say,
Oh, if he's a god, then I'm not so sure I want to meet him, because I think they're a bit too powerful for me. But
not a vengeful god.
okay, good. No, but these figures trigger this desire to have architecture be not so boring. I mean, to really allow it to have a life. And it's in this spirit that I see your work, and I think there's a certain moment in which television was, for architecture in general, a kind of possibility of architecture not being so boring. And figures like you sort of touched that and played with that. But most architects, they hate TV. They hate everything about it. It represents the death of architecture or the replacement of architecture. It's the enemy incarnate. You know, the TV set, it embraces you, communicates you, gives you fellowship, gives you interaction, all the stuff that we are supposed to do. And also, it doesn't care about buildings. It gives you the same signal wherever it is. Even the signals go through buildings. They don't even sit down and have a cup of tea with you. They just head on through. So there is most of architects a little bit afraid of TV. And then there's another group who don't necessarily work with it directly, but touch it. And Waxman was one of these types. And Mies, by the way, loved television. He loved watching boxing and Westerns. You know, so we have, of course, in architecture, this myth of him as a sort of brooding, thoughtful, Germanic, philosophical type. No, he was a heavy drinker and television watcher. And somehow these ephemeral, light projects that he made, that Waxman made, and that I think you continue to make, this is, I guess, what I'm saying, are connected to this, you know, world of communication that opened up in the 20th century, and that we are still, you and I, part of. Something like that. I mean, it's now sounding like a speech, but I don't mean it that way. I'm trying to understand why I like your work so much. That's what it is.
I have to keep producing it.
Yeah, please.
Churning it out.
Yeah, so we should stop so that you can keep drawing.
Okay.
And if you're lucky, you don't get to talk to me about it again for a while. But I have to say, for me, as always, it's a total delight. And we will attach some of your drawings to this video so that people can enjoy. And I look forward to seeing the next versions of Cushicle and 25 by 25. And I'm wondering if those two can ever meet, by the way.
In 25 years' time.
In 25 years' time. So let's talk, Michael. Let's disconnect.
Okay.
And I'll let you return to your web. But it's the most interesting spider I know.
Yeah.
Hope to see you soon, Michael.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.